Hello everyone, my name is Affiera ASMA binti AHMAD SABRI 254317, and in this video I will be presenting about the aggravating factors as well as the mitigating factors that can be raised by the prosecution or the defense counsel before the accused is sentenced by the court. What is mitigating and aggravating factors? As provided here, mitigating factors refer to any fact or circumstance that lessens the severity of a criminal act. These factors are usually raised by the defense counsel to support their leniency in sentencing. Meanwhile, aggravating factors refer to any fact or circumstance that increases the severity of a criminal act. The prosecution may present aggravating factor in order to seek heavier or more severe punishment. This means mitigating and aggravating factors refer to the factors that are usually forwarded by the defense counsel as well as the prosecution before the court sentence the accused. These factors will influence the degree of punishment, where the lighter or severe sentence will be imposed upon the accused in order to uphold criminal justice. Now, let's move on to some of the mitigating factors, which include age of the offender, conduct of the offender, effect of conviction and sentence, record of the offender, circumstances before commission, plea of guilty, and also gap principle. The first one is the age of the offender. Age, especially youth, is an effective mitigating factor, and this is recognized in Section 96, Subsection 2 of the Child Act 2001, that a child aged 14 or above shall not be imprisoned if they can be suitably dealt with in any other way. However, where circumstances so warrant, the court would disregard the age of the offender, particularly where the nature of the crime does not reflect the immaturity of the offender as a child or youth. Old age, on the other hand, is not a mitigating factor because if old age is accepted as ingredient to light sentence, the court will give the wrong description to the public that old people are given special treatment if found guilty. We can refer to the case of public prosecutor against Yap Huat Heng, where the court said that the court usually gives priority to the aim of punishment and gravity of the offence rather than age. In this case, the learned judge increased the sentence for rape and robbery despite the age of the accused. The second factor is the conduct or behaviour of the offender. The court will also consider whether the accused is repentant and remorseful of his act or not. Besides that, the court also will look whether the accused is able to cooperate with the police and willing to pay for compensation as to his misconduct. In the case of Raja Izzuddin Shah against public prosecutor, the accused had pleaded guilty to an offence of assaulting a public servant and was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment. Apart from pleading drunkenness, the accused also showed that he was repentant and remorseful for his act. The accused was also ordered to pay compensation of 200 ringgit to the victim, which could be one mitigating factors in reducing his sentence from 3 years imprisonment to a good behaviour bond. The third one will be effect on conviction and sentence. The defense counsel may raise this factor to show to the court that upon sentencing the accused, heavier punishment will give effect as to the family of the accused and his job as well as other privilege. The defense counsel or the accused himself may raise that he has a family and children to support. The accused also may lose his position or reputation as a consequence of the conviction and sentence imposed upon him. For instance, in the case of Chan Sik Hong against public prosecutor, the accused had unhesitatingly pleaded guilty to the offence charge and raised that he had a wife and 5 children to support. Also, there was a humiliation to him and his family, having been arrested and charged in court and a conviction recorded against him. Therefore, the court had substituted the sentence of 1 year imprisonment to a fine of 2,000 ringgit in default 3 months imprisonment. For the fourth factor, which is the record of the offender, the court will consider whether the accused is a first-time offender or has previous conviction. This is because a first offender was a strong mitigating factor and lighter punishment will be considered by the court if the accused has no previous bad record or misconduct. In the case of Abdul Karim against R, the court substituted a sentence of 3 months imprisonment with a fine of RM 400 as the accused was a first offender. Similarly, in the case of public prosecutor against MUKHRIZ, the accused was released on a good behavior bond although he was charged with sedition as the accused was a first-time offender. Besides that, circumstances or condition before the commission of the crime such as provocation, drunkenness and consent also may be considered by the court before sentencing the accused. This condition might help the accused to mitigate for a lesser punishment upon him. For instance, in the case of PP against Ahmad Khairul Faiz bin Mat Dahlan and others, the court imposed a sentence of 14 years of imprisonment for an offence under Section 3 or 4 of the Penal Code after taking into consideration that there is a sense of provocation which had caused the accused to lose his self-control and retaliate and commit the offence. Meanwhile, in the case of PP against Raja, the court observed that the girl victim had asked for trouble when she agreed to pass the night with the accused at the rest house and had only reported the rape after a lapse of 3.5 years. Usually, in cases like these, the court will impose a lighter punishment to the accused as it involves the consent of the victim herself. The next mitigating factor will be the plea of guilty. This factor is the most used by the defense counsel as well as the accused in mitigating before the court as it saves time and cost. It is an accepted rule of practice that the accused should be given credit or discount for pleading guilty. However, the court may also refuse to grant any discount in appropriate cases in exercising its discretion. In the case of public prosecutor against Syaritan anak lelaki Pacemutu, the accused was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment after a 1/3 reduction for having pleaded guilty and cooperated with the police and whipping of 10 strokes. The last mitigating factor that will be discussed in this video will be the gap principle. What is gap principle? Gap principle refers to the time lapse between the previous conviction and the present offence of the accused. The court will disregard the previous offence and the person will be treated as a man of good character if the gap since the last conviction is considered sufficient for the accused to rehabilitate himself. In the case of Susai Nathan against public prosecutor, the court held that the gap between a previous conviction and the present offence should be viewed as a mitigating factor rather than an aggravating factor. The longer the gap, the greater the mitigating effect. The accused in this case had made an effort to rehabilitate himself since his release from 24 months of imprisonment about 7 years ago. Hence, the time lapse since his last conviction should be taken into account as mitigating factor to reduce his sentence for the present offence. Now, let's look at the aggravating factors that can be raised by the prosecution in order to increase the punishment for the offender. Some of the factors are previous conviction or bad records of the offender, the prevalence and rampancy of the offence, the mode of committing the offence, use of force, and the last one is the position or status of the offender. Let's start with the previous conviction or bad record of the offender. Previous conviction and bad records of the accused can be one of the strongest aggravating factors for the prosecution in order to impose a heavier punishment upon the accused. The court will consider whether the previous conviction and the present offence of the accused are of similar nature, which would render him as a persistent offender. This means, if there is no stricter punishment imposed upon the accused, he will be not afraid of committing the same offence again in the future as the current punishment does not have a deterrent effect on him. For instance, in the case of public prosecutor against Ja'far bin Daud, the court enhanced the sentence from 8-month imprisonment to 18 months imprisonment for possession of 0.21 grams of heroin as the accused had 5 previous convictions, 2 of which were possession of drugs. The next aggravating factor is the prevalence and rampancy of the offence. The court will take it seriously because of its rampancy and will usually give heavy punishment so that it will be a lesson to the public to not do the same offence. For instance, in the case of public prosecutor against Hyo Eng Kwan, the accused was released on a good behaviour bond under Section 294 of the Criminal Procedure Code for possession of drugs under Section 39A of the Dangerous Drugs Act. The public prosecutor appealed for heavier punishment, and the bond was substituted with 3 years imprisonment as the nature of the offence is considered as a serious case. The third one is the mode of committing the offence. The nature of the accused in committing the crime is very important to be determined by the court before passing a sentence. If the offence is committed with brutality and there is use of force, then a heavier sentence should be imposed upon the accused. In the case of public prosecutor against Safian bin Abdullah and another, the mortally wounded victim was brutally strangled with a rope. The court then passed the maximum sentence of 14 years of imprisonment towards the accused, considering the crime was done with brutality, although the two accused pleaded guilty to culpable homicide not amounting to murder. The last aggravating factors that will be discussed is the position and status of the offender. The status or the position of the offender has been held to be an aggravating factor in several cases. However, it depends on the discretion of the court whether to impose stricter or lighter punishment upon the accused. For instance, in the case of Datuk Haji Harun bin Haji Idris and others against public prosecutor, the accused, who was the Menteri Besar Selangor at that time, was sentenced to 6 months imprisonment for forgery and a fine of RM15,000 for abetment of criminal breach of trust. The Deputy Public Prosecutor had appealed to enhance the sentence as the accused should have shown a good example as a leader. The Federal Court then enhanced the sentences to 4 years imprisonment on the first charge and 3 years on the second charge to run concurrently. This case shows that the prosecution can raise this factor to impose a heavier punishment towards the accused even if he holds a high position or status, as no one is above the law. In conclusion, before passing a sentence, the court will have to consider several factors raised by the defense counsel as well as the prosecution. This is to ensure that the accused will be convicted and sentenced justly and accordingly. The sentence passed will be given based on the factors raised, as either lighter or heavier punishment will be imposed upon the accused. To impose a heavier punishment, the court must be able to determine that the factors raised by the prosecution to be true beyond reasonable doubt. Oppositely, for mitigating factors, the court must consider the reason as to why punishment for a criminal act should be lessened. Therefore, this will ensure a just and fair sentencing imposed upon the accused.